One of the challenges that the Biden team really has faced is they don't have great operators. And why don't they have great operators is fundamentally because the ethics rules prevent operators from being in those jobs because of stock ownership.
Hello, fellow data nerds. My guest today is DJ Patil. DJ was the first U.S. chief data scientist under President Obama. He's currently a general partner at GreatPoint Ventures. He's on the board of Devoted Health. He co-chairs the taskforce on GenAI at the Pentagon. DJ, welcome to World of DAS.
Awesome. Finally, I get to be here and hang out with you.
I am very excited. We've had so many conversations over the years, so now we have one that is taped for eternity. So anyone, any AI can be trained on this going forward. Now, you actually coined the term data scientist. And now we've got an interesting juxtaposition in the data science world where AI is kind of transforming that field. What percentage of today's data science work do you think is going to be automated over the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I mean, a bunch in there. So I think the first is, the term data scientist obviously is kind of we were trying to figure out what we should call ourselves when we do this weird thing with data. We didn't have a labeling approach. And so I think it's like the interesting thing that I'm constantly surprised by is like, why is the term taken off? And I think it's because it's kind of a catch-all phrase for people who play with data, and that it gives you a lot of space to go do things. Like if you were the BI person, you're not allowed to go build models.
Yeah.
You're kind of only allowed to build graphs or
it's a training name. Well, my major in college was operations research, which today would be called data science, but operations research is just a terrible name for a major.
Exactly. And the statistics is too narrow, doesn't allow the physicists to be in there or the mathematicians. And so it kind of works better. And so I think because it's like a term that has always been a big tent kind of term to allow people in there, like the data engineers used to be data scientists also. They weren't the data engineers. And so what we're now seeing is a question of like, well, what's this next phase of data look like in terms of roles, responsibilities? Like, what do you do with these different jobs? And I would expect there's increased specialization. And at the same time, we're starting to see this new disruption that's starting to take place because of the use of these technologies. Like we're starting to see the AIification in there, but there's also a ton more that is like the old school is coming back, like the ability to design tables and structure data more carefully, more thoughtfully, with an eye towards the problem. That's a thing. Making sure you kind of have good governance, the kind of the data steward ideas coming back. So a lot of this stuff is
doesn't so much of the traditional data science job is being attacked by AI. Like it seems like it could do so much of it today, way more than most other jobs are being attacked. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think there's parts of it, yes. Parts of it, we're just not seeing it happen. At least from where I sit, we haven't seen it happen. Like the biggest limiter for AI in that we see in the enterprise right now is that still people don't have their data in a good place where they can do something with the data.
Yeah, got it. So it's still that data munging part of it has to happen.
Like that, we're still on that, we had that kind of pithy way we said it. It's like, data cleaning is 80% of a data scientist's job. I feel like it's kind of gone up to like 87%, sometimes like 90+%, because it's like you got more data in. Somebody's kind of like, well, there's these heterogeneous data types that start showing up. So stuff gets really messy. And then you're like, how do I do something with this? And so you're spending all this time munging that data. And I mean, you've been living this like your whole career, like doing the exact same thing.
I've been like only data munging. That's all I do. It's a terrible thing to do, but because the fun stuff is all the other stuff you get to do after you munge it.
Totally. And you've seen this a ton also, like you interview people and they just don't understand how important that is for having context or doing the job. And then you also see like what you've done with everything from Rapleaf on. And also it's like you're taking advantage of the fact that others are either lazy, incompetent, or it's just technically hard to do. And like you kind of go across those three dimensions and you get a lot of defensibility. And when you are good with this,
Though I do think that the AI systems do seem, I mean, at least when we've been using them quite well to actually do a lot of the data munging. Like it takes a lot of the rote work out of it. there's a lot of things where sometimes you need like a low price labor somewhere, and the AI can really do most of that. So maybe could take on
Yeah.
80% of the low price labor you were doing before. So AI
Yeah.
is
So things
attacking
that
a
you're
lot of this
sending
data cleaning
offshore.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, like the cleaning side, like the stuff that you might be sending to a back office that's typically gone out to Mechanical Turk or
Yeah.
offshore to like organizations like in India or the Philippines. This often happens in healthcare. You have these BPO shops, these business process kind of shops that do this. A lot of that data is really ripe for it because it's not like real good data cleaning. It's like, well, let's change this from comma delimited to semicolon or put it in the right structure
How do you
form.
think AI is going to attack different economies? Like for me, from my standpoint, I don't know that it hurts like the China economy because it's so manufacturing based, or the Japan economy is so manufacturing based. But if you think of like the India economy or the Philippines economy, where so much of that is just back office to the US, seems like those economies are going to get hurt
Yeah.
very, very, very quickly through AI. I don't know if you agree with me or not.
Yeah, so I think the areas, it's interesting. So we had the opportunity to write the first national strategy on AI under President Obama, and that included autonomy and a whole bunch of other things. And what's interesting is what we got right and what we got wrong. In there, what we got wrong is that we thought there was going to be a lot of job displacement. In the classic self-driving cars, like
Yeah.
the
Truck
robotic, and we
driver,
realized
right.
dexterity is hard.
Yeah.
What we because of transformers and all that other technology, you get the ability to code. So the companies like Infosys and others, where that coding layer in India typically, where that
Yeah.
coding layer is not high quality, it's sort of like just laying down tons of lines of code. That stuff, I think, is starting to get impacted. I expect it over the next 5-ish years to really get impacted.
Agreed.
A
Yeah.
lot of that stuff in India and the Philippines in the back office, a lot of that's healthcare based. And so that is like, robotic process automation was already starting to make inroads on that. A lot of places, because of the way healthcare works, is that you have these artificial barriers that allow you to do something with the data. So as AI comes in, I think that my belief is that that is going to be where the health systems get margin from. And so they're looking at that and saying, hey, how do I take out that margin? And that margin is directly attributed to dollars that are outside the United States. And so that impacts the Philippines and India predominantly. How big of that of a market is it for this like that? I just haven't checked or stayed up on top of that.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to impact different groups in different ways. But I would not be long India, Philippines right now, at least unless they make their own pivots or they invest more on kind of go more upstream, which they may be doing
Right.
as
Well,
well.
we are starting to see more of those people in those BPO shops saying, hey, why am I not building a company that's just doing this? And
Yeah,
taking it because they have deep expertise
that's right.
in
In the process,
the
right?
process. Like it's
So maybe
stunning
the
how.
company does extremely well, but instead of having 1,000 employees, they have 200 or something.
Right. And then like what we're seeing, which is stunning, is how many companies in Israel, out of India, who are healthcare focusing only on US healthcare. And then when I say healthcare, I mean like the back office, the
Yeah,
claims engine, all these components. And so they understand healthcare better than many of us in the United States do.
yeah, that's a really good point. My experience has been like that the average software engineer at a top company is super high quality, but the average data scientist at that same company is often like fairly mediocre. Would you disagree with that?
I think it's super lumpy all over the place. Like, like you can go to some places and you find data scientists who punch way above their weights, and you find others where you're just like, it's very frankly weak sauce. I think there's a few things that are going on. Is that the first is that the places where you see really good data scientists doing stuff, they're not going to hang out if they're not valued. And most
Yeah,
of the time, even though you have good data engineering, it doesn't mean you value the data
good
scientists.
point. So at Google, you're just going to value the software engineer more than the data scientist. So
That's right.
a great data scientist might leave, and you're just left with the good data scientist or
That's
something.
right. And so what I see a lot of times is that the data scientists are in sufficient demand and they go to good places. And now that especially the data science, so let's kind of split the data science camp into two, like which is traditional just business intelligence analysis, and those that are building models. Like that would be typically machine learning algorithms all the way into the AI layer. And so if you get to the business intelligence layer component, those people a lot of times pick up other jobs. You see a number of
the
data
product
scientists who
manager
are really good.
or something like that. Yeah.
But people forget Kevin Wheel, who's head of product for OpenAI, started off as a data scientist at Cool Iris, then went to Twitter as a data scientist, and then moved up into product.
Yeah.
I would argue the similar thing happened to me as on the technical side is data science, kind of playing with data, doing stuff, and eventually moved into product roles. And so I think the data scientists often have the ability to take on other roles versus engineering is like, you're in the engineering box, like you're technical there.
Yep. And it's a good point because if a company doesn't value engineering, like the great engineers are probably going somewhere else anyway. So that's right.
Well, here's another thing that we see, and Auren, I think you fit squarely in this bucket, is a lot of the people we see who are data scientists are just multidimensional by the nature. Like, I think that's why we get attracted to this, right? Could you be a Silicon Valley guy? Could you be a policy guy? Could you be like a dozen of another dozen type of roles? You're equally adept at all of them. The physicists that we saw coming into Wall Street early on, playing with experimental data, they were data scientists too, whatever we were going to call them.
Yeah, that was the main data science role, was that physicist. Yeah,
exactly. They're just like, you're a quant. And so what I think we have now that we see across data science, especially places like Berkeley, where we have an incredible data science major program, is those students are multidimensional. Like if you want to do economics and you want to play a ton with data, where's your home? Yep. If you want to do anthropology plus data, there's no direct home, or social sciences. There's this kind of new horizontal across the verticals of traditional academia, and data science ends up being that layer.
Yeah, and often that the person who's most successful in those fields, the Raj Chettys of the world, they're also data scientists as well. Like they happen to be an economist, but they really have that extra data science skill that's there.
Right. I think Raj Chetty is a perfect example of like, what do you call him?
Right.
He would call
himself an economist, but he's clearly also a data scientist. Like he would not be successful if he didn't have that skill as well.
Well, here's the thing that I have been seeing for the last almost 10 years is that departments like economics have not given the course load or kept up with the world as data gets messier. And so what you see from a lot of those students is they want to go, they need the skills and techniques to work with messy data. So where are they getting that? They're getting it out of the data science shops, out of the AI parts of the computer science departments, other places. And that's the shift I think we're also seeing now with full-blown AI is like, where are you going to get that training? Where is that happening? It's oftentimes not in your home department. It's like there's a little small cadre of people who've really got that. And we haven't figured out how to get that to scale yet.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, that's really interesting. Now, when you back in the day when I used to interview people for like data science related roles, I would care a lot about their proficiency in things like probability and statistics. Does that even matter anymore?
Yes. But what I'm testing for is I'm testing for a few things. Like, my default question back at LinkedIn was like, here, we gave you all of LinkedIn data. What do you want to know?
Yeah.
What questions would you go? So
I'm looking more for creativity too.
Yeah. Creativity, curiosity. So I'm first looking for that because I'm looking for the long pole because there's a lot of people with the technical skill. So I want that early decision point rather than the technical capacity first. Second, then what I want to see is that you're not just doing a cookbook approach to solve problems. Like you're thinking about the different parts of the messiness of data, the other issues. Like, the classic used to be somebody be like, you give them a bunch of data and they're like, well, I'm just going to do k-means. And then they're like, okay, then I'm going to do, SVD. Right. And they're just kind of going through this like recipe book of things. And you're like, did you ever ask like, where did this data come from? Did you ask some of the other characteristics? Yeah. And then the probabilistic and the very technical is, do you have real touch and feel for the nuances of data? because you can understand probabilities, but there's a difference in like being able to appreciate like the probabilities may be lying to you or confusing, or there be other intrinsic things. Like the depth of understanding of probability or statistics is really important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's super interesting. The What are we like struggling most with data science today?
Oh boy, what are we struggling the most? I think we're struggling with a few things. One is we got to, and I think everyone is going to struggle with this. Is like the world's changing. The technology landscape is changing so incredibly fast. What should you what should you do? Like what should you study? Where should you specialize in? Like I get asked all the time. I'm sure like you do. It's just like what should I major in? Like what are those things? And I kind of tell people like, well, I would major in something where you're also deeply passionate in several other areas. Like you can't just be only computer science or
Yeah.
like only data
It's the
science. I think you got
the
to,
join of the things or
yeah, you
something.
got to be like, I guess the pinker way of saying it is like you want to be a T. I think you got to be like an E. You got to be deep in three areas and then horizontal.
Yeah.
And so like, if you're going to be interacting in the physical world, like mechanical engineering or robotics or something, and data, that's great. That's like a super dynamic place to be. Like that's awesome. But you got to have that.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please sign up for our newsletter. Go to worldofdas.com. The link is in the description below. Now back to the video. One thing I'm surprised about is just the value of data, raw data. I would have thought that with just the rise of data science, the rise of AI, that just selling data would be a better business today than it is. Like the market for raw data is not growing. It's growing a little bit, but it's not nearly growing as exponentially as I would have predicted 5-10 years ago. Why is that the case?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. The first I would point people to is I think you had a really good thread about walking through the wrap leaf acquisition all the way through, right? Like what that looked like and the value creation and how companies think about. So that's a really important take that I think people don't appreciate in like the business sector. Two is I think when we see the value of the data ecosystem, there's a few things going on. One is there's a set of data that I think remains very polarized. And I certainly fall in this camp around certain types of data brokers and the information that has been captured, which really aligns with the FTC report that was published almost a decade ago, and Congress has yet to act on it. The other form that I think is people have yet to see the unlock of data. Like one of the versions of the big data collection components that's in there is biobanks. And so we have all this data that's been collected about people, but we haven't yet gotten the pharmaceuticals out of it. So people are asking, hey, what's the value there? In the collection of data, like the type that SafeGraph and you've been working on, one of the things that's always been surprising to me is like we saw incredible value of what could be done with this data during COVID response.
Yeah, for sure.
Helped the state of California a ton, the nation a ton on this front. And we said, look at all this is being done, but people haven't been able to appreciate it. I wonder a lot of times, and I think healthcare is a little bit more of the way to look at this, which is it's not just that you're selling the data, you're selling a very crisp product that the data is underneath of it. And so you don't realize that the secret sauce really is data. So it kind of looks a little bit more like LinkedIn, maybe.
Yeah.
Is it like
it's an application? You're selling the application is been a lot easier than selling the data itself.
That's right. Because people, and to be fair, also, there's a lot of data acquisition that you can do. You can buy lots of data and it does not move the needle. It's not that good. Like I had to do this for Devoted Health in the early days to try to build out our mailing list, physical mailing list to people and figure out, like who might be eligible in our markets that could benefit from our service. And we did a ton of this looking through the data that we were buying from vendors, and we were like, this is not good at all. And we're getting
marketing data historically is not good.
That's right.
Because like in marketing data, if you're like a bit better than throwing darts, it has some value.
That's right.
So even like gender is like 75%, maybe 80% correct in most marketing data.
Right. Well, and we thought we were clever because we were like, well, we know this isn't that great. What happens if we bring this data together with other data sets?
Correct. Yeah.
Could we
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
something
That's the
more?
problem. Yeah.
And
Just
you know,
compound the errors. Yeah. It's
and it
like
was
point
still
0.8 times point 0.8. It's not the other way. Right. Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
It turned out not to be as the quality that we wanted.
Now, you are also involved very much in like the DoD world. What are some non-obvious issues the Department of Defense is grappling with when it comes to AI?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of things that I think are worth thinking about. So the first is, how do you use these technologies? Where do you use them? And sometimes people just think people's heads jump off into just like autonomous weapon systems,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole nuclear security footprint is going to go to AI. It's actually that some of the best places. The way to think about this is on the x-axis. This is like prime for one of your kind of social media posts of like the y-axis is impact, kind of like think of it as a hand wavy impact / scale,
Yeah.
and then think of the x-axis as consequences. So if you're high on the consequences side, that's where your weapons worlds are. That's where medical, like in the medical clinical world, that's like there. You like surgery, like
Yeah.
diagnosis, like that's high consequences. High impact, low consequences is like travel systems, paperwork being filled out, things
Yeah.
like that. Logistics, moving batteries, fuel,
Yeah.
those type of things. Perfect, amazing opportunities to do that. You have a lot of people, like over 3 million people who work at the DoD. A lot of them are doing jobs that they don't want to do because they're just like, you got some enlisted person who's just like recopying a form. It's like a
Yeah.
bank.
Yeah.
It's like
Totally.
healthcare. So that's the place where it is. You also think about the data sets that the DoD has overall and what could be unleashed if you bring all that data together, both for the national security apparatus, for research and development purposes, healthcare. There's an incredible opportunity. Like one of the ones that I think AI has is our fastest path to figuring out how to get synthetic blood developed, which would be amazing not only in the battlefield, but people have it in an emergency vehicle, those type of situations. Synthetic blood could be a game changer for the country. Tissue regeneration, these type of things, these technologies to get advances in that, or material sciences on a path to fusion. That is going to be AI driven, and that to me is some of the most exciting opportunities. And so the question is, how to do that? When people talk about using AI for planning systems or everything, this is like the same thing that we've seen in data. Like the reason why you don't see data used in some organizations or in basketball teams or a lot of other places is it's cultural.
Yeah.
There's a very big cultural element to this. And if you can't get a notion of trust, so when people talk about trusted systems, a lot of times they're thinking like transparent, fair, fat, all these kind of things. And what I would encourage people to think about is, how do you develop trust with these systems? Trust includes all of those things, but you have to put this in a commander's hand or somebody who's a decision maker and say, here's the output. Do you believe it? Are you willing to take action based on this? And that is a different component of how we build products rather than just the technical ability to build a product.
The Defense Department writ large is one of the most bureaucratic institutions in the world. And so on one hand, the great AI can attack the bureaucracy and make things way more efficient, make things move faster, make decisions get made quicker, et cetera, because it could flatten things out. On the other hand, the hardest thing to attack sometimes is bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy will stifle it. They are smart. They don't want to lose their own jobs. They'll make things really slow. Everyone I know in the Defense Department who's tried to implement whatever it is, some transformer or some other type of kind of large language models that has been stymied, has had 20,000 pieces of red tape thrown at them and not being able to do something. How do we actually make progress in a defense department? Or are we just like 30 years from now, we're still going to have like kind of a first-rate bureaucracy and a third-rate fighting force?
Mhm. So I think that there's a whole ton in this. So the first is, my belief is the fighting force that is AI native is the one that wins. You
Right.
have to be AI native to win and to
Everyone you talk to in the Defense Department believes that.
not
I've
five
never,
years ago. 5 years ago,
today, I would say
today.
100% of people that I have ever talked to believe that.
So
They just,
that
and they
has
all want
taken
it to
us
happen. They just all think it won't happen
right.
because of the bureaucracy.
People never thought, like, the Air Force adamantly used to refuse the idea that there could be autonomous drones in use. Like,
Right.
that was an
Yeah.
active stance. The Navy was there. So I use that as an intentional example that we can create a thinking mind shift. So we've created the thinking mind shift. Now, how do we get the actual work to take place? And that's the other thing. So, for example, one of the programs that we had to run right over, thanks to Ash Carter, was the Hack the Pentagon program, which is allowing the Pentagon to use bug bounty programs. And everyone said, you're going to tell China and all these other countries exactly where the bugs are and where the holes in the security. And you're just like, well, that means they already know where the holes
Right.
are.
Right.
Only
Totally.
we're finding out about it.
Right. Right.
And so once we got that in, that everyone that became the de facto way of doing things. So you have to show people the way to do it. So what we do need is leadership, right from the Secretary of Defense all the way through to say, this is the way we have to shift this. Same thing happened when the Navy decided to move to nuclear vehicles, like basically nuclear ships. The other aspect that's not talked about and usually attributed to bureaucracy is Congress has to get on board.
Yeah.
Every
Oh my
time
gosh. Yeah.
Congress says, DOD says, we don't need a new aircraft carrier, we need AI. And
Yeah.
Congress says, well, my district produces this part, you get an
Exactly.
aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
And Rumsfeld, I remember working under President Bush on these problems after 9/11. Rumsfeld was back then saying, we got to transform this stuff to be more agile, to figure these things out. And yet we're still stuck and mired in this. So the part
So
that
what do we do about? I mean, everyone knows, that's Congress problem. We're spending all this money on aircraft carriers and on tanks that are just going to get easily defeated in the next war. Like, we all know all these problems. We've got these fighter jets that cost $1 billion each that are just not going to be effective. What do we do about it? Like, Congress is in the way, the bureaucracy is in the way. Like, is there anything we can do, or do we just have to accept defeat?
No. There's zero chance we can accept defeat. So we should just be, first off, I think what I would tell everyone is, it's very easy to be cynical about the DoD. It's very easy to be cynical about the government. Our job is to fight cynicism. We have to fight the cynicism because too much is at stake. There's too much at stake. The world is not a safe place. Like, when we look around, the way people want to approach things, that's happening. Other countries want not only our technology, but they want to hit us with the technology so that we're hurt by it. So what are concrete things we can do? So the first is, and I think this is the first tiniest of a step, is the Biden National Security Council issued an executive order just a couple days ago that says, go faster with AI. National security teams, everyone else, you need to go faster. Two is, you need programs like the Defense Innovation Unit, things like that Doug Beck is leading, to go even to be able to get funded. And so constituents need to support that. The executive office has to support that, to say we have to have DIU, Defense Innovation Unit, to scale at literally 10x. We need that much more to happen, because you need new ideas to come in. Because a lot of the traditional Beltway bandits, they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is not helpful. And then the third thing that is there that we often forget about is, we need the right kind of talent to show up. The talent has to show up. And that is, those of us that have the skills have to go in and take the roles, and not just the roles at the coding layer. We need people who are running major components, who are the AI officers, like the Craig Martells, who used to be at Lyft and was he at Lyft, or one of the ride sharing companies. He was also at LinkedIn, and then went in to be the chief AI officer for the DoD and got a bunch of stuff off the ground. You need a deputy secretary who understands this, and you need secretaries of defenses who think about this the right way and are going to drive it down from the top, and you need that bottoms up. Is like it's there's no easy solution when this is 20% of GDP. It's kind of like the same thing where people are like, why can't we just fix healthcare? You're like,
Right.
it's so big, you gotta attack from all the sides.
I think even if we do all those things, I feel like they all kind of like help on the margins and stuff. Like I'm glad we did DIUX and stuff. Like I feel like it's helped on the margins and it's good. But like the primes don't care. They're still as fat as ever. All the services companies, Booz Allen, Khaki, like all those guys that are out there, like they don't care. Like they're still as fat as like they're all just like. And then the DoD itself, it's just like they just have this like a massive bureaucracy. It's like 6 layers of paperwork to go do anything. It's so hard to like actually do anything. And I feel like none of those things they're all like good ideas. They're all like things we should do for sure.
Starts.
But it doesn't, I feel like doesn't attack like the main problem. And I don't see like the main problem getting any better. Like I feel like the main problem still gets worse. All those things help in the margin, but if the main problem gets worse, like it doesn't help. I don't know if you disagree with me.
So Auren, part of this is like, you're one of the best conveners on this of people bringing people together. It's people like you and others that have to convene people.
Well, honestly, I'll convene like top generals in DoD, and all they do is they all know the problem. But they're like, my hands are tied. Congress has tied it, or I can't do anything. Or it's like, and these are literally like 3 and 4 star people. You think people have power, but they're like, I have no power. I can't do anything. I'm a 3-star, I'm a 4-star, but I literally have no power to go change really anything beyond this like little thing that I'm working on. And in there I can try to do it, and I can try to grow people and mentor people and all the other things.
So I think there's early indications of positivity, like what we're seeing out of the war colleges with people who are just coming out and they get this, right? So we see that new leadership there. You're absolutely right that there's this paralysis kind of feeling across a lot of people. I look at what CQ Brown is doing, what General Smith is doing, Commandant of the Marines, who worked with us a ton on a bunch of these things with Ash Carter, and they get it. And the question that is at hand is, how do we create a collective movement for what that is? And that really has to be thought of as major work by Congress. Like there just needs to be a new study of like, what do we want the Pentagon to be? And that the problem there is that everyone is going to lobby the heck out of it.
Yeah.
And we have to just hold true to that, because, and part of this, what I hate to see happen is the way it was said to me, which I think is the worst example of this during the Gulf Wars, was the country's at war, but the Pentagon isn't.
Yeah.
And I think that is a version that we still see today. And the version that I hate to see happen, which is kind of said, is that we have to see an existential crisis moment for us to get our act
for
together.
Sure. If we have an existential crisis, I believe we'll figure it out. But ideally, we should be able to figure out without that. Yeah,
that's right. And then we have multiple existential crises already.
Correct. I mean, they're just slow-moving crises. Yeah,
there's a reason. Like I'm an unpaid volunteer to work on these problems at the Pentagon. I would tell everyone I'm doing my part to the max ability that I am legally allowed to, by the number of days I'm allowed to spend at working on this by under congressional laws. I am maxing out.
That's another crazy thing. Like I have friends like you who are volunteering in national security, and they're like they want to even help more, but they're not allowed to.
That's right.
Which makes no sense. So like, I don't even want to get paid. Just like, let me help. They're like, no, sorry, we're capping you at the number, and you have to like log your hours and all this other stuff. Like, it's crazy.
If you look at my paperwork, it's amazing.
Right. It's so silly. It's like, oh, DJ Patil, like the guy who invented the word data science, wants to help out more. And, this guy is like crazy expensive, but he's willing to help you for free.
Well,
oh, no, sorry. We can't let him help. It's bureaucracy,
I mean, this gets into the weeds of something, but there's a real problem we have. And you and I lived this during COVID. No one cared about the rules.
Yeah,
Right.
that was COVID was awesome.
Right.
Like that. I mean, COVID itself was terrible, but that kind of like March through November, let's just say, of that just like intense kind of 6 months, everyone was working on it. People
Right.
were like, we're going to break the rules. Who cares about this like
We may
transactional
not be here
authority?
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Let's just go.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Like let's move fast. Let's break the like,
That-
and things got done.
that's right. And I think one of the key lessons there, people like you, people, like all the people that were, written in Michael Lewis's books, all the other stories, all of us, we had deep operating experience, and so we were allowed to come in. Normally, if there's another problem, we're not allowed to come in because of
Yeah,
ethics rules or other things. And there's important reasons for the ethics rules, but we need to rethink them. For example, one of the challenges that the Biden team really has faced, I believe, is they don't have great operators. And why don't they have great operators is fundamentally because the ethics rules prevent operators from being in those jobs because of stock ownership. But if you
yeah.
help build a startup, but there's no liquidity, like there's no public market, you can't get free of it. Or maybe your spouse works in an area, and your spouse is doing an incredible amount as a civil servant, and you've lived this too.
Yeah.
Is that we make it really tough.
It's so silly. It's like, oh, it's like, imagine if you're like a billionaire and you own like $1,000 worth of General Motors stock or something. Like you probably don't even know it's in your portfolio. Certainly it's not going to affect your decisions or something. Now I
Right.
can understand if you own like $1 billion of General Motors stock and your net worth is 1.1 billion, yeah, you're going to be making, of
Yeah.
course, like you should be recusing yourself for anything dealing with the automotive industry. That makes sense. But these rules are just so archaic.
Well, my big this is my soapbox version is I think there's lots of places that I would call theaters, right? Like, you go through the airport, there's a security theater. There's like a
Correct.
lot of stuff that there's a bunch of good stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that you're like, this isn't real security. It's just not.
Yeah.
Um, there's a bunch around these things around ethics, and there's ethics security or ethics theater, and it's not really addressing the real problems. There's a bunch of this other stuff. Like you pick your versions of this, and what I think we would do far better about is just asking, like, how do we actually solve real problems? And then, like as we've learned at being data people, taking a probabilistic approach on things is a really healthy, constructive way to actually get maximal forward progress on things.
Did you read Unit X, the Chris Kirchhoff, Rod Shaw book?
Uh,
Oh, okay. Got it right there.
I have it right here because
Okay.
Ash Carter is the one that
Yeah.
made me figure out how we were going to reboot it, and I was very, very grateful that Raj and Chris decided to jump in the role and do it. And so I owe them a debt of gratitude for taking on that role and driving it.
I love the book. I love those two. Those guys are great guys, great patriots. I love the book, but the book is so frustrating. It's like all the red tape, all the ethics
Yeah.
things that they threw at. Like there's so many rules about it, all this ethics stuff that they threw people. It's just like a whole series of like terrible anecdotes about how the both the Congress and the Defense Department bureaucracy gets in the muck of any type of like even like minor innovation.
Oh, absolutely. Although I will say this other one, the Ash Carter inside the five-sided box, it shows the picture of how it's really brutal
Yeah.
to do this, but also some of the tactics and techniques that Ash Carter personally used to make the progress that he did, and measured over 30 years, really substantial progress. The the thing is we can't wait 30 years.
Yeah.
We can barely wait 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, Carter really did kind of almost like he was a very smart kind of infighter, very smart about moving things, very smart about getting stuff done. And he had a lot of imagination and innovation that we just don't see from most people in that role.
He was a
Uh,
physicist.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, but like somehow he also had like the strength and the courage to do a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of blowback that could have happened. And there's a lot of people who try to investigate him and try to tarnish him. And there's a lot of primes who didn't like him. There's a lot of things that just like we need more people like that in there. And no offense to Lloyd Austin, I've never met him. He seems like a very nice man, but it just doesn't seem like he's attacking it in the way of like, okay, we're in a crisis, we have to do the right thing. He's just more just like managing the Pentagon, right? And these are people like from the same party. You would assume there's some, but they're just very, very different operators.
I mean, the DoD, like all federal agencies, and like we could have this exact same parallel conversation about Health and Human Services, HHS.
That's right.
Why doesn't FDA collaborate more with NIH? Where's the CDC in this? And we saw abject failures from the CDC during COVID. And I think Mandy, who's the current director of CDC, is really working hard to fix some of those things. But I would have hoped, and it really pains me to think about the CDC not being the data place that we needed it to be. And we saw what the power of data could be. We saw what you were doing. We saw what COVID tracking
30 years ago, like the CDC, the Atlanta piece of the CDC, that was like amazing. And I don't know if it's 30, 40 years ago, like that was the pinnacle. And then somehow it just kind of there was some, again, it may have been the bureaucracy as well, but just like slowly attacked it. They're just doing less and less. They still do some good work, but there's so many things they could be doing better.
That's right. And I'll give you an example. Rob Califf and I worked, who's the current FDA administrator and was FDA administrator when I was working with him and Francis Collins, at NIH. We were really focused on asking the questions like, why does somebody have to go through phase 1 trials if something that is effectively the same thing already did? Yeah. Why should we waste that money and go through all the human trials again? Because we're wasting a lot of time to get there.
Because we know it doesn't harm in specific ways. So now it's really just about like, well, solve this particular problem.
That's right. And then also similarly, like how do you start to get a better level of trust with devices, especially that are AI enabled? All these kind of questions. And so one of the things, so Rob is trying to get that restarted. A lot of that fell apart just because of COVID. I think it's a very bipartisan approach. Everyone is kind of on board with this. At the same time, one of the things that, that the reason I got so involved in the creation of Devoted Health was we said, who's going to walk the talk of delivering healthcare? Who's going to figure out new models to do this? Who's actually going to do it? And then our version was, well, we did it on the policy side. Now we need to do it on the entrepreneurial side. And the reason Devoted Health can do so much and is able to deliver care at the price that we can given the margin structure of healthcare is we are leveraging a ton of data. We are leveraging not just the data, but we have machine learning, we have AI technologies that are used to augment things, mostly the back office. And that's where we get leverage. And that's where we can keep teams smaller, we can keep things cheaper, and we can have better outcomes because we're able to use all of that. But it starts honestly with a really good environment and data hygiene and quality. With data is a first-class citizen.
In healthcare, like data is so siloed and it's in all these legacy systems, and obviously, like it has to be interoperable. But what else do we need to do to make that better?
So healthcare data, many, many different types of healthcare data. But the way to think of this was my first big aha with healthcare data in that the service of healthcare, not the research side, not pharmaceutical or those sides, just the service. So think hospital data, working with your primary care physician, et cetera, insurance payers. That data is not big data. It is very sparse data. It's repetitive data. It's error prone. It's all over the place. Yeah. And so the infrastructure that we have typically brought to this, which has been consumer internet technology, doesn't work really well. Do you need Kafka moving data around super fast?
Correct.
No.
Yeah.
You need more like Airflow plus kind of technologies to do
And
this.
ideally, it's like somewhat persistent. Like, why do you have to answer the same question like 15 times and stuff like that? Like, come on.
Right.
Or it should just say like, hey, this is what you answered last time. Like, do you want to update it? Like, you answered this
Yep.
about your mother,
Right. Well,
last
the
time,
fact
and
that
your
the fax,
grandmother.
you know how hard it is to train someone on a fax machine these days who just graduated from college?
Oh
They're
yeah,
like
yeah.
they're like
I
six
have
generations.
I have no idea how to use one anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
they're like, "What's a fax machine?" I'm like, "You're not
totally.
supposed to know." It's like
Yeah,
trying to teach somebody like what an old school typewriter is or an 8-track or
yeah.
something. And
Oh my
so
God, yeah.
we
Faxing the prescription. I mean, it's just silly.
it's ridiculous. And so what we have to do is, and this is where it's so important on policy for these things, is you need technologists in the room. And the reason is because like you have policy people are saying like, we need healthcare interoperability. Your data should go from one provider to another. It can't just be locked up. But there's nobody in there who's like, what's the exact API? Like, how do we think about this or these other things? This is actually
Yeah,
why Mickey Tripathi, who is the head of the national coordinator on this, is actually for the first time ever, the national coordinator is not a physician. He's a data guy. He's a
that's awesome.
technologist,
Yeah,
which is like, well, who else would you want? And I
right.
can't tell you how much of a fight this was for. This is like one of my big throwdowns during the transition, which I'm now somewhat allowed to talk about, is saying like, this is the kind of person you need. You don't just want a physician. This is a technical problem,
Right.
and there's enough technologists who understand medicine who can help you here.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like it sometimes we we take this like air of expertise that someone's supposed to have, like they're a good heart surgeon or something, which is a very, very
Right.
important job. And then we assume like, well, then they could fix the medical system or something. No,
Right.
it's like you're a great heart surgeon, that's what you do. You may not know anything more than anyone else about fixing like the IT systems that go through. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't transfer from one to another.
Well, let me address the other side of this, which is on the side of health records and using it to discover new drugs, to find new treatment policies. This is what I was really tasked with on the Precision Medicine Initiative. Was until we were really working on this during the Obama administration, hospital systems thought it was their data, not your data.
Right.
And so that was had to be a major change. Now, in there, you have the health system who's saying, well, sorry, it's the EHR company's fault. And the EHR is saying, no, it's a hospital's fault. And they're just pointing at each other. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, the patient is suffering. What can we do here? Even though we have interoperability today, we have still made it too difficult for large data sets to be brought together for clinical research use. And then when we do bring them together, everyone finds a reason why somebody shouldn't have access to the data.
Yeah. That's right. Right. And today with like, if you use things like homomorphic encryption or what, you can join data sets and be able to query, ask questions of the data sets without actually seeing the underlying data. So you can have your cake and eat it too. You can get rid of the whole privacy issue and be able to get all the benefits of being able to join these like really valuable data sets.
Well, you talk to most people who have diseases, there are rare diseases, other issues. They're posting all their data online anyway.
Correct. Yeah.
They're posting it with.
What do you care about your privacy if you're going to die in the next year?
Exactly.
You want to get fixed. Yeah.
And people think that this is just a data perspective. People forget how clinical trials got revamped by a bunch of incredibly courageous women who had stage 3, stage 4 breast cancer, drove a car into the middle of the campus courtyard at Genentech, handcuffed themselves to the car until Genentech said, okay, we're going to listen to your demands about giving them access to treatments ahead of than what they traditionally would, because they're not going to live until that moment. They know they're going to die. Let's give them a chance now.
Yeah. There's a feeling amongst many people I know in the health data world, health tech world, that Epic Systems is the evil empire. How true is that?
Mm-hmm. So there's here's the challenge is Epic is pervasive. It's like in all these systems.
Yeah.
If you talk to a lot of physicians, There's a pocket of them. They're like, this is amazing. Look at all the things I can do. There's another pocket, and I fall into this, and I think a lot of other people say, my doctor is spending more time talking or typing than talking to me. And
Yeah.
then because of that, you need a scribe and you need all this other systems. And you're like, well, who's practicing medicine? And so we, on the data side, have really done, in many ways, a disservice, because we said we could collect all this data. We could do all this stuff with electronic medical record. And yet we have not yielded that result back
And
to
by the way,
public.
even when the data's in Epic, like they don't really like have
They won't
easy
let you take it out.
APIs to get. Yeah, exactly. They're like,
They
no,
won't let you
sorry,
take it
it's
out.
here. It's ours. It's like, hey, we need like a court order to get the data out or
That's
something.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just Epic; it's the whole system. So
Yeah.
when I worked with the Trump administration closely to work on a rule that says hospitals must post their data about pricing online.
By the way, I love that rule. Like, why
Right.
did it take till the Trump administration? I mean, it's so obvious. And people have been talking about that for 30
Forever.
years before that, right? The Clinton administration talked about it, then the Bush administration, then the Obama administration, finally the Trump administration, finally. I'm like, why did this take so long? Like, it's
Because
so obvious. We should have
I
done
can
that.
I can tell you concretely, because every step of the way we eroded their ability to fight back. But it took us first to get people to believe it was their own data.
Yeah.
It took Castlight becoming a company to try
Yeah.
this out. And then when this even happened, when the Trump rule went into effect, the Trump administration's rule went into effect on the healthcare data, those hospital systems put up the data in file formats.
Where you can't even read it.
You can't even read it.
Yeah, they
It's like-
obfuscated, they did everything possible to not comply.
That's right. It's like passive aggressive
Right.
to the point of like absurdity, right? Until like you have to start enforcing it. And so this is something that most people forget about data, technology, and making change happen, is you have to have an enforcement side. Somebody has to be there to either shame people or other things. And I think the data community kind of collectively came along and shamed the hospital systems into saying this. The big problem still to this day, and one of the things I didn't know about this, I don't think you probably knew about this, but like when we were building our companies and doing stuff in Silicon Valley, the government was saying, we are going to make a move to electronic health records. We need companies to show up. And guess what? None of us showed up.
Yeah.
No one in Silicon Valley showed up. Who showed up? Epic's like, well, we're the billing layer. I guess we'll do that.
Yeah. Booz Allen, I'm sure, is in there.
Who's else? Exactly.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
when we're like grumpy with them, we're like, well, why doesn't it have Silicon Valley tech behind it? Well, we didn't show up. We didn't compete.
Well, my guess is, I don't know the story, but my guess is like these things are rigged from the beginning to make it hard to compete, because it's like, oh, you have to have these like 572 requirements, most of which are not needed. And so the government is very good at like specifically requesting software, and they're really good at requesting features that will A, make things be at least 2 or 3 times more expensive, and B, those features will actually degrade things 2 to 3 times as well. So they request things all the time that add costs and that make the product worse. And then it's like, well, why would you want to build a bad product if you're a great tech company? You're like, I don't want to build a piece of crap. I want to build something beautiful and something that works.
Right. There's another problem, which we call is that, a startup is like crossing this desert. The desert's short, the desert's long until you get your first customer. Government makes it really long, and then longer, and then longer, and then longer. And you're like, there's no oasis. And that's kind of like why we started the Defense Innovation Unit. And I can't tell you the number of times I jumped in to kind of say, like, these requirements make no sense or are unnecessary. The problem also in this is, to be fair, and this is one of my hopes around AI that we're starting to see, is people to kind of go in and say, where is this stuff screwed up? Where is friction in this collection of, because like the number of times general counsel would say, well, it turns out there was this one small law that was passed over here. And you're just like, that's what's going to break everything?
Totally.
This one tiny thing is going to stop the entire fixing of the healthcare system? You're like, that's insane. And then you have to go to Congress with this one small thing?
It's crazy. No,
We need a big refactoring. And I think that this is oddly enough, Macron is the one who just said this in France, is that we have to ask ourselves really what outcomes we want. And then have we the right protections, the right barriers on it? And in many cases, we have areas where we have too much regulation. And then we have other areas where the regulations do not take into account today's world. And this is like, for people to know where I stand on this, this is where I think like SB 1047 did not make sense.
what
Which
is that? I've never heard of that. What's SB 1047?
So there were 18 laws that were signed by Governor Newsom here in California around AI. And those 18 were like very common sense. Like you can't use AI to create child porn. You can't use it to create revenge porn. You have to disclose it if you're using this in clinical settings. You can't use it for hurting people with denial.
Seem all very reasonable. Yeah.
Like you're like, duh. You're like, stuff shouldn't happen anyway. There's one those are typically at the application layer. There's one at the modeling layer, which was saying, models above a certain size must do.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
There's like a whole bunch of other requirements. And you're like, well, that's a yesterday approach to the problem. And 2 is it really hurts the opportunity to leverage open source. And then 3 is like, where's the enforcement? And 4 is it's going to cost a ton to stand up a new government organization to look at this stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's going to hurt our ability to actually use these systems for good purposes. So then it means that we lose this opportunity to actually have this technology because the laws aren't going to get changed for 30 years. So my view of that is like, we'll kick it back down to a collection of people from broad basic around the community. Let's figure out what the common sense approach for this is and then go.
So there are so many data founders and CEOs that are listening to this. What is the one data set you wish you could get your hands on that they could create for you?
Yeah. So my greatest one that I want to see is the precision medicine data set, like a giant data set of healthcare data, clinical data, payment data, environmental condition data, because I want to ask questions, just like we do with an LLM, where we say something like, hey, process this, or show me like, find me interesting recipes, or build a recipe for me for, a group of 10 people, 2 of which don't eat fish, 3 of which are vegan. I can do stuff like that. I want to look at that data set and I want to say, show me all the common characteristics of people who have Lyme disease. Show me all the people who have this rare disease that people like to say is one of N, and it turns out there's 30 of them, and what we might have an off-label use for that drug.
Yeah.
Find me all the places where healthcare costs make no sense because they're outlier costs and we're paying for it, but it's fraud or it's abuse of use of systems and it doesn't make sense. I want to reevaluate why we give certain therapies or treatments, and that we look at them and we say, is that really make sense? Or are we over-treating people? Or maybe we're under-treating in the case of maternal health, like with Black mothers, for example, people of color, where the mortality rates are too high for a society, a first world society like the United States.
Now, a few personal questions. When is that? Okay, like if anyone listening to you're obviously a smart person, you got a PhD for math, et cetera, but I think you've told me before, in high school, you didn't have like the best grades. You started out at a junior or kind of community college, so we're a little bit more of a late bloomer. How do my guess is there's millions of people that are late bloomers, maybe tens of millions of people that are late bloomers, didn't have like the most amazing grades in high school or something. How do we tap into that potential?
Yeah, so it's true. So I got super lucky, despite growing up in Cupertino, the hotbed of technology, right, in the early 80s. I still was, the school system just didn't work for me. That style of education just didn't work for me. I needed something else. Like I would have loved it if I had Wikipedia and Khan Academy and these other things. That assumes I would have had broadband, a laptop, and access to tech. But I think one of the things that's there is I got so lucky because I had an institution that was effectively an alternative safety net. It's like you didn't get into regular college, fine, come hang out here for 2 years and grow up. And I can't emphasize enough how lucky I was, because I had lecturers and teachers who were more interested in teaching than research.
This is when you were at De Anza College.
This is at De Anza College.
Yeah.
And they were very invested in helping me.
Which anyone can go to, right? Literally anyone can go sign up. Anyone can go.
And it's a deal. It's like unbelievable economic value.
Yeah.
And so it's why I'm such an advocate for 2 years of college education should be free for everybody. Because I not only for retraining, but for all the late bloomers that are out there. I met women at study groups.
But it's essentially free. I mean, it's cheap, right? I mean, it's so cheap.
It's cheap. It's cheap.
Even today, it's super cheap, right? To go
super cheap.
Yeah.
And you get to mix with people. You're not just dealing with people in the ivory tower. You're dealing with people who's they're juggling, like single mother, single father. They have another job and they're studying for this. The real hard trade-offs. And those people taught me work ethic in a very different way. So when I got ready and I really went into I finally moved to University of California, San Diego, I was like very focused. I was very determined. But I don't think I would have found my love for mathematics without that, or definitely not my love for data without those professors and those teachers or who were there. It's also one of the reasons I think liberal arts is so important. I think too often we kind of just ignore the liberal arts. I know, Auren, I'm always envious of your ability to read both breadth and depth. But like that ability to think critically and learn those things, I think the liberal arts schools are phenomenal for this and helping foster what you want to be.
I'm somewhat skeptical of that, which is like, I mean, I think most people I know who are like really into the liberal arts stuff today, it's almost like school was not good for them on that. I don't know if school is always the best place for the liberal arts. And a lot of people develop the passion almost in spite of school. And many people I know who were history majors or poli-science majors, something like they don't even read anymore. Like 20 years later, they're not even reading those types of things. So I'm not sure that it actually fosters it. I feel like it can almost like take out the passion.
Interesting. So for me, my minors are in theater and psych. And it's like what we call programmer concentrators. They're effectively minors. And those things taught me so much more about the world. And maybe it's because also I was coming from a technical field. So I was this is how I got to see what the world was like versus, staring at this math proof for 4 hours and being like, how does this work? But what I guess the thing that I think about these days is we're so good at customization of apps and technology and ads, yet we're so poor at being able to customize our curriculum for students to figure out what works.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. And teaching generally not that good. I mean, you mentioned, I was an engineer at UC Berkeley. Most of my classes, at least in my early years, were taught by very well-known professors. Many of them had Nobel prizes, and they were on average terrible. They were not Richard Feynman, who's maybe the one Nobel Prize winner who's like amazing at teaching. They were, I couldn't even comprehend them. I couldn't understand them. They were probably great for postdocs, but not great for an 18-year-old. And then one year I took a summer class and I had a professor, an engineering professor from San Jose State. And he was the best teacher I had had in 2 years. And that's because his profession was teaching. He knew how to teach, right?
He's at San Jose State because he cares about
teaching. He was amazing, and he brought it to life, and he really helped us all understand the material. All of us were so much better at the end of that class than we were at any other, the step function, than any other class that we took.
That's right. And that's the same thing for me at the junior college level.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I had it also in versions at UC San Diego. I had this professor who basically, it was a late undergrad class, so it was upper level, but he basically treated us like grad students.
Yeah.
And he handed us our ass daily, just crushed us. But his kind of approach was like, this is what it means to be really understand things. And like, we're so lucky when we get to be with an educator that is like that. One message I would have for people out there that in the corporate world also is, I think, Auren, I know you have been this kind of person, is that we often get so myopic in our own world. Like we're so narrow in our own, like the amount of things in our hand. We forget to lend a hand to somebody else.
That's
we
true.
forget the ability.
And
like
sometimes we forget how many people lend a hand to us.
Exactly.
Right.
Like I got lucky to meet you early on when I moved out here in Silicon Valley. You massively informed a lot of my thinking.
I got lucky to meet you. I mean, we got lucky to meet each other. At that point, we were peers, right? So,
but it was like you could always pick up the phone and call. You could always, like, there was never like, what are you going to do for me? There was always like a community vibe. And, that's what I've always tried to say, data science is a team sport. However you want to define data science, I think it's a team sport. And so if you're suffering in silence, you're doing it wrong. You need to raise your hand and let people know that you need help. If you're out there and you have the capacity and the ability to help somebody, you should be helping somebody else.
Yeah.
You'll be that teacher like that I had or you had at San Jose State. Be that person, because when you do that, you're going to get so much more out of it. That's how we create systemic change.
Oh, this is great. Last question we ask all of our guests. What conventional wisdom or advice do you think is generally bad advice?
Follow your passion. Because I think it's just like, it's so easy just to say, follow your passion without doing the hard work. I think it's really about like, not just passion, it's about finding experiences, figuring out that, and knowing that your interests are constantly in flux and changing, and you should be having so many ideas and working with so many different people that is out there. Find what I find like the one is, people always say, what do you like, what you don't like? Find what gives you energy. Figure out what takes away your energy. Get rid of the things that take away your energy and focus on the things that give you energy and inspire you. And that's
interesting.
So
I've asked this question now to over 100 people on this podcast, the conventional wisdom or advice that's generally bad advice. And I'd say the number one thing people say is that's bad is follow your passion. So you're in that.
I did not do that just because I listened to the podcast.
No, and I think it's probably a third of the people have said that exact thing. So that it must either now that might be the conventional wisdom already that it's bad. Like it's already moved to the other side. I'm not sure, because like everyone now thinks it's bad. Yeah, I want someone to be like, follow your passion is the right thing to do. Right?
You have to have one of the classic Auren Hoffman graphs that show this.
Totally. Yeah. It's like it's now it's clearly conventional wisdom at this point. Yeah. This has been amazing. Thank you, DJ Patil, for joining us on World of DaaS. I follow you at dpatel on X. I definitely encourage our listeners to engage with you there. This has actually been a ton of fun. We're old friends, so I really enjoyed this conversation.
Always, brother.
And if you're a super data nerd, go to worldofdaas.com. That's DAAS, worldofdaas.com, and sign up for our weekly Data as a Service news roundup newsletter. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider rating this podcast and leaving a review. For more World of DaaS, and DaaS is DAAS, you can subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. And also check out YouTube for videos. You can find me at Twitter at Auren, that's AUREN, Auren, and we'd love to hear from you.